Conestay, how are ye? Welcome to the Candlelit Tales Podcast and to another episode filled with laughter and joyousness because we're having an absolute mare trying to get this one off the ground, but we're getting there. Okay, we're not going to go again, it's fine. Welcome to the next episode of the Post-Show Chats. We're talking about the Kerry, the kingdom, the one and only place where the Sleep Mist Mountains are, and, well, we had the story of, what's her name? Mis and Dubh Ris, and then we had the story of Scotia, and we'll be talking about them very soon, won't we?
Yes. Today, in fact. Right now, in fact.
Right now, in fact.
This minute, in fact.
Thanks very much for coming along and sitting in to hear our chats. If you want to hear about the chats, just, listen.
If you'd like to hear more of our podcasts, listen to our podcasts. You're in the right place.
You're in the right place. There you go. Great.
If you'd like to subscribe to anything, you can hit subscribe now.
Yeah, on the videos. And you can also do that on the things that you follow on Spotify.
On your podcast app, whatever app you may have.
Right, yeah, so we've talked a fair bit about this series up to date. We're doing mythical places, we've gone around the country, not getting literally around the country, but, you know,
we have gone to some places. We've been to some places, we've seen some things. Sometimes we haven't literally been there, we've been there in our imaginations.
Yeah,
figuratively.
On Google Maps to check it out.
And on Google Maps to see if the place is where we think it is in relation to the other places.
So we did a whole, going on to Mis and Dubh Ris, we did a whole thing there. Was it last year or 2 years ago? I can't remember. I think it was 2 years ago.
I feel like this was a lockdowny thing. I feel like this was 2020. I think it was kind of like, because we had nothing to do except podcasts all the time. And we decided to do a big battle of entry thing. Partly because you had a beautiful book of the Battle of Entry story. Which was bilingual and beautifully illustrated, and we pulled a lot from that. And yeah, we did a whole series on the Battle of Entry, and we'd come across the Mis and Dubh Ris story before that. I actually heard this first from Nuala Hayes, who's she's part of the Storytellers of Ireland, and she told the Mis and Dubh Ris story. And I remember thinking it was great. And she had a fantastic way of telling it. And you told it previously on, I think on the podcast. Was it a podcast?
That was a live recording. It was up in Whelan's one of the nights. And again, it was just, it's one of those ones that you don't know how you're going to tell it or how it's going to land. I think I told it, we did a few weddings this summer, and the whole thing about Irish love stories not being happy endings, not really having happy endings at all. There's not very many love stories without tragedy. So when you're performing on the second day of a wedding and everyone coming in with the hangover heads and they're kind of sitting down,
you're like, let me tell you about the Sons of Ishnok, the beautiful love story where everybody dies.
Dear to the sorrows, that's awful. Anything, Maeve is pretty, terrifying. Not loving. It's just like,
no, she's sexy, but she's not very. She's not very loving.
Kilcullen and just kills everybody he loves and dies, and Emer's, that only jealousy of Emer is not exactly a great one to tell at a wedding. You can imagine.
Depends on the wedding, I suppose. But yeah. No, okay, a little bit controversial.
A little bit controversial. We've always said there was one definite true love story, which is Angus Og. And
yes,
again,
the dream of Angus Og, Angus and Kerr is a proper, they fall in love and they live happily ever after, kind of as swans.
And we managed to do that at the end, and as everyone loves the lovey, happy ever after. But
and I told that one at Neil's wedding.
Yeah.
Neil and Audrey's wedding. That was fun.
And of course, that goes on a treat. So also, what goes on a treat is this story to a live audience, especially if they're after a few pints. It's a
very fun story to tell. It's a very fun story to tell.
You never know how many ways you're going to get away with, what's that?
It's great.
What is it?
Your
version of that is creepier than mine, I think.
Yeah, well, I like to lean into her being really terrifying at that point.
Yeah.
I think so. My nerd brain kicks off with the Mis and Dubh Ris story.
Okay.
Right? Because if you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh wow, we're going back to the very first legend ever written down.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a bit in that where there is a wild man, kind of created to be the friend of Gilgamesh, and they're rivals first and then they're best buddies. Okay. And they have this whole bromance. But he's a wild man called, I think, Endiku. I can't remember exactly how you say his name, but I think it's Endiku. And the way that he is Like, he first lands in the wilderness, in the forests, and he's completely wild and he's kind of savage and bestial. And the way that he is brought into, like, some form of community with other human beings is one of the sacred prostitutes goes out and has sex with him and calms him the fuck down.
Ah, the sacred prostitutes.
Right?
Yeah, if only we could bring back the sacred prostitutes.
I mean, legalize sex work, for starters.
That'd be a good way
That would
to
be a
do it.
really great first step.
Be a really great first step.
But what was really interesting to me about this one is that this is like kind of a gender flip version of that. Because she is the wild woman. And it is the things that he introduces her to, the three things that make up like humanity and culture. Civilization. He shows her money.
Money's always a good one, yeah.
Cooks food.
Oh, yeah. And music.
Sings to her.
Yeah.
And sex.
Yeah.
Like, they're the kind of like, I don't know, social lubricants that he sort of introduces her to conceptually and actually up in the mountains.
Snortle.
Yes, I know. You can't say lubricant, especially in the context of talking about
sex.
Like, but I also think it's interesting that, like, the Babylonian myth is about, like, you know, women are the civilized ones and they have to civilize the men.
Yeah.
And the Irish myth, it's like that's kind of flipped as well.
Yeah.
Of like, women get real dangerous.
If you have to leave them off.
And we've talked about that with the kayak as well, of like the terrifying aspects of femininity are very kind of present in Irish myth. And they're not, I don't think they're demonized in the same way. I think there's way more of an attempt to, the monstrous in male characters can be kind of dealt with and accommodated and met with in some ways. And in a lot of mythology, the female characters kind of don't get that. You're either monstrous, you're either fucking Madonna or you're whore. Like, you're either monster or you're good little wife daughter. And like, don't think about that too hard.
Don't think about that at all.
But like, you know, you're good little quiet, sit, you know, barefoot in the kitchen, sit down, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the willingness of Dubh Ris to actually go and confront Mish's monstrous aspect and still treat her fully as a human.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I guess, the warning of a wild woman out in the hills, the fact that there was, people are afraid of this mysterious creature, this feminine power, this, you know, people are afraid to go up into the hills, and the story takes on more than could possibly be and
the implication is that she's kind of immortal while she's wild as well, which I think is also interesting.
Certainly more powerful, removed from society, removed from the shackles of being domesticated, and therefore more powerful. And like,
which I think is also a truth of humanity. I think there's something that, like, people get, there's a certain amount, like this is, now I'm thinking of COVID as well, of like, there's a certain amount of, because there's some wild shit happens in isolation when you're removed from society, though. Because you go
binging 10 episodes in a row.
Yeah, but you can get, I don't think I'm unique in this, because I think when you pull back from society, or when you are pulled back from society, you can get more in touch with what is powerful in you. You also get real fucking weird.
Yeah, well, you lose that, so as you said, the social lubricant that makes you able to kind of mix and mingle and commune and gather and trade.
The
and
thing that reminds you that you're a person.
Yeah, and empathy, just I presume is the main thing that would lower from isolation. You're just not able to empathize with other people because you only have one perspective.
I think that's probably true if you're raised in isolation. I don't think that's true if you, like, experience isolation as an adult. I don't know. That doesn't kind of line up with my experience of it.
I mean, I'm saying that just in terms of prisoners being put into isolation, dehumanizing aspects of not being with other people, and how far removed you get from your own humanity by. I think
it's more about you get removed from your own humanity. I think like, and it's incredibly damaging when it's done to someone.
But in doing that, because my head's not spinning at it. So by removing yourself from humanity, as you know, for example, Mish is in this, or the wild man in Gilgamesh. You know, like, you're outside of societal boundaries, rules, laws, interactions, norms, and the wildness of a wild man, wild woman, is that they'll hunt you, like, they could kill you, they could devour you, they'll chop off your head. That's the rumour, that's the fear, that's the build up, and to go into it's going into more the animal state, the primal kind of base desires, hunger, food, and survival. And so then again, the attachment to humanity is being able to perceive another person's point of view that is removed from you, and having a third person perspective, having a kind of empathetic link between your connection to human nature and another's, whereas the animalistic state is much more devour, food, kill, survive, me. Now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so that's where I think that isolation would cause...
Well, that's kind of how it can make you, like, yeah, maybe it is that makes you go a little bit weird. I know it's been true of me whenever, like, when I go goblin-y, as I do, periodically.
We all have our duvet days.
I call it Goblin Cave.
You've called it a Goblin Cave.
You just go into the Goblin Cave and nothing. No food, no leaving.
The no food thing is the one that weirds me out now. Like, I can have a duvet day, don't get me wrong. A couple of them, all very good at it, but like, I fucking feed myself.
Yes, you're better at that. You. This is a better tended flesh prison than mine. This is known.
Prison? Did you just call me a flesh prison?
I didn't call you a flesh prison. We both have flesh prisons.
Yeah, there you go.
We are in them.
We are. Our sacred divine being is encapsulated.
Yep, in a flesh prison.
A flesh prison.
One must tend the flesh prison whether one wants to or not.
So Mish doesn't do a great job of tending towards that.
No, she doesn't.
Taking care of her, and that's what sends her wild. She's her hair is demented. Her eyes demented.
It's not what sends her, because what sends her wild.
Oh yeah.
Is the battle.
The death of everybody she knew and loved.
Yeah.
That would send you off.
What sends her wild initially is the trauma of the defeat.
Yeah, that would. So it's her father, the king of the world, who doesn't sound like a very nice guy if you look at the...
He seems like a prick.
Yeah, he doesn't sound like a great guy.
Doesn't seem like a great guy.
One of those old ruling class guys who wants to conquer the world.
Very, very patriarchy, very colonizer-y, very, we don't like it.
Yeesh.
No, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
Please do not.
Big fan of him. So
yeah, he seems awful, and
he again to briefly run over the Ceann Fionn Trá, or the battle. Ca Trá, sorry.
Yeah, Ca Fionn Trá.
Ca Fionn Trá.
Which is the Battle of the White Strand.
Also
if anybody wants to know it.
As
also
Ventry.
known as Ventry, which is the anglicised word for Fionn Trá, which is
Fionn Trá, Ventry.
Fionn Trá.
They always fuck it up in like a really not good way, don't they?
Yeah, it's bad.
It's like
Ventry, Fionn Trá.
Fionn Trá is way better than Ventry.
It is. Anyway. Brian Friel's translations, great play.
It's on the Abbey actually. It's nearly done, and she's to get to that shit.
No, you had a thought?
I did. So summary of. Don't be throwing other names plays at me. So this story is basically Fionn and Fianna. They save Ireland from the the clutches of the king of the world, who comes with a massive army down to Fionn Trá.
And it takes them a year of battling in the sands to like eventually. They don't drive them off. They kill them all. They all die except one guy gets away and is sent back to be like, go tell that story.
Yeah.
Tell people not to fucking come back, basically.
Didn't really work out so great in that one, but anyway.
I mean, no, obviously not. But
so she sees everybody die.
And
she runs up to the hill, and I assume just tries to lose her mind from the grief.
Well, I think she loses her mind and then she runs away. I think that disconnect from humanity is what happens when she sees that horror, and then there's that terror of like, am I going to be one of the ones killed? And then there's nothing, we're talking about connection. There's nothing there for her to connect to.
Yeah.
None of her people are left.
No support system.
No support. Nobody to talk to. Probably doesn't speak the language.
So she goes off, and luckily Dubh Ris comes and saves the day.
Which I think is like a long, 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 long time later.
Yeah, we've no idea how long.
I don't know. But it's kind of, the implication is that like she is a figure of myth and legend, and it's long after Fionn and the Fianna are gone. And like she's been kind of, that's what I mean by like she's been more powerful in her wildness, like because I think there is a truth in that. I think there is power in wildness. I think there's huge power in wildness. But there's also that trade-off of like, you know, you're fully alone. You are fully disconnected. There's huge power in it. But like, if you think of people going off and fucking, you know, monks going off and meditating in the Skelligs, and like, there is a draw to a lot of people of like going to the wilderness, going off on your own, being isolated, being away from people, like going into kind of, you know, there's a lot of different kind of religious practices that encourage that kind of thing, sequestering yourself and cloistering yourself off. And that's not the energy that Mish was going into it with, but like there's still something there about like there's power in it. And she finds that power and she taps into it, but she doesn't seem to be terribly happy.
I mean, yeah, happiness is kind of a...
Which is it's an interesting one actually, isn't it?
If you're just surviving, you know, I think pleasure and sustained pleasure and contentment are things that are, you know, created and carved out of existence, opposed to, you know, immediate relief or pleasure that you get from gratification or applause, but like sustained comfort and contentment is something that like you do have to go off and meditate and Skellig for fucking years to kind of achieve a level of or have a fairly good practice, or have a fairly good something going on in your life that's going to ground you, bring you back. And I think, you know, more and more we're seeing rewilding, you know, courses, people going out, you know, realising they need nature. Like the number of festivals this summer in Ireland was unbelievable. And like every weekend there was a festival because everyone wants to get back out and, like, you know.
I mean, we can talk about to what degree festivals are nature.
Yeah, but
because a lot of them,
it's a draw.
It's a draw to go sleep in a field. A lot of the time, it's a draw to get real fucking drunk.
Yeah, but I think that is linked to the draw to connect to nature, but it gets confused. It gets confused because it's a draw for ritual and celebration, and it's a natural.
It's also a hugely social draw to the festival stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think is a little different. I think going off and like camping on your own in the
totally, you know, and that's where like
up a mountain is kind of different.
The actual rewilding stuff that, like, you know, Lucy O'Hagan, that's it, of what I'll be working with in September, is doing a fantastic set of courses, and, you know, that's fantastic to see people like that doing it, you know, true and like wisely. But I think the desire to go off and have mad fun around a fire and dance, it gets thrown into the festival kind of foray, but people desire that and need that as a form of connection, celebration that's not really in society. And like, look, every, you know, Friday night or Saturday night could be seen as that desire too, to go buck wild, but like it's the wildness that's inside you that you don't get to get out necessarily.
I think we're talking about two separate things, because I think we're talking about, I think what you're talking about is wildness in communion. Yes. You're talking about like a kind of primal release of tension and energy that happens in a group. Yeah. Whereas I think the kind of like I also think there's power in that, and there's release in that, and there's like necessity for that. But I think the wildness of someone like Mish is a different wildness. Because she's not going into the mountains with her mates. Oh, totally. No, sorry. I know it's not the same. I'm not saying it is. I just think there's two separate. There's different kinds of, like, when we say it's one of those times when we are saying the word wildest to mean three different things. Yeah. So like her wildness is bestiality and feral, and it's her, maybe deliberately, maybe not, and maybe like out of necessity for her survival, disconnecting her human side and becoming absolutely feral and becoming kind of monstrous and terrifying because of it. But like, what's interesting to me about it is that she doesn't lose her humanity. She just disconnects from it. Yeah. And like, I think that's the interesting thing in this story, is that another person, and like, he's not the first person. Other people have tried. Other people have gone up and tried to find her and tried to talk to her and tried to reason with her. Maybe tried to trap her. We don't know what those failed attempts were. But like, somebody is like, it is through talking to another person and through meeting another person and through interacting with another person in all these various ways that he offers her,
Totally.
that she's able to reconnect to her own humanity,
Mm-hmm.
that she disconnected from. And I think that's also like contains a really important thing, which is like, no matter how wild a person goes, no matter how feral and violent a person becomes, because I think that always or almost always comes out of some kind of trauma, whether it's direct trauma or transgenerational trauma or whatever it is. I think the challenge for the rest of us in a society is to hold their humanity.
Absolutely.
And like the king does that in this story
King
first.
does it, yeah.
Because he says she's human. She she's not to be hunted. She's to be brought back.
So I think I have the connection in that where my little head went without having it fully thought through. So her mind breaks presumably when she sees the death and destruction, and she runs off to the wild. The desire to be wild is a human instinct to cope and to be and to
not think.
And whether she hunts and whether she just sleeps in the trees, going feral, going wild, going kind of howling at the moon type thing, that I think is what she falls into that, and she severs her humanity. She stays in it until she's literally just guided back bit by bit by bit, and bits of herself are put back together till she can kind of join society. I think that the instinct to go wild and feral is what I'm talking about with like when we're so caught up, and I think like the trauma of the 2 years lockup was something that people went, the fuck, like need to release something. And that's where the drive for, and I'm not saying it's the direct one, but to go to festivals, to go camping, to go out, to go to the sea, to go swim, to forest bathe,
everybody
be in nature.
Locked up in their own little box for 2 years meant a lot of people really wanted to go. I want to go somewhere outdoors with a bunch of people and act like we haven't acted like in a long time. So there's a draw to whatever kind of wildness it is, whether it's connected wildness or disconnected wildness.
And the disconnected wildness, you need to take steps to actually reconnect yourself back into pattern again, or back into flow with people, I guess, which is interesting.
I think there's a lot in this story about how humans create each other and create ourselves in community.
And it's all in Kerry as well. Like it all lands down in the kingdom, the beautiful wild westerly coast that it has, and it's very no good in fairness. Like
you'd see
the Cork man in me.
Cork man in it was dying. You called this episode The Kingdom.
Oh, you did.
I have no loyalty. I don't.
I know you don't. You sound like you're from Dublin this day.
I do when I'm in Dublin.
You're always in Dublin.
No, sometimes I go down to Cork and then I briefly sound like I'm from Cork.
Really. So the other story we're going to look at is also based in the Slieve Mish Mountains.
Yes.
And this is all very close to Tralee. There's a few rivers around there.
So this is a story that you had some trouble with finding a narrative of.
Yeah, well,
so we're gonna talk about how to find a narrative.
Yes, yeah.
And we decided we would record this just to kind of give people like a little bit of a look into
what's coming up and what I'm gonna have to do. So this is kind of the process sometimes.
Well, you found a bunch of facts.
I found a bunch of pseudo facts, a lot of information, a lot of YouTube videos, and a lot of your books and bits and pieces, and we can link whatever I can think of in the show notes when I put the story up. But in terms of fact finding, I tend to throw an awful lot at my ears and see what sticks and see what I hear, see what joins. But this one, I guess, okay, so my cousin, our cousin,
yes, we are siblings.
Killian Fox sent me a little thing. I just heard this about Scotia, and she was the mother of the Gaels and went to Scotland, and Scotland based after her, and she's linked in with the Book of Invasions, and she's this grave down in Glen Scotia, down in near Tralee in Slieve Mountains, Slieve Mish Mountains.
Slieve Mish Mountains.
That'd be a cool story for you to do in this series. So thanks, Killian. And I kind of went off on various tangents, and I kept on finding too much information, because it is pseudo-history. The story or the series of bits of information.
Well, there's also like 2 Scotias.
Yeah.
Which doesn't help. And then there's a lot of people being like, this is complete pseudo-history. And then there's a couple of, by the sounds of it, very controversial historians who are like, well, actually, there is some evidence for this, which is like, is there?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of debate around, did this happen? Did this not happen? There was also a lot of, at the time it was written down, it was written by monks in the Book of Leinster.
Yeah.
There was a lot of attempts to like connect Irish mythology to biblical history.
Yeah.
To just kind of like get everything to sit together and tie together a bit better. And it was kind of like, this is another potential link in.
Because Scotia's husband met Moses or something, yeah.
He got healed. Moses cured him of a snake bite.
She cured him of a snake bite. No, she cured him.
No, that was Moses. Or she cured Moses? Somebody cured somebody of a snake bite. Moses was there. That's what we're working with here.
So that's so again,
that's the level of like bullshit.
I told you too much stuff before you got into it, which is all kind of disparate, but it's it's the link between, again, trying to tie it in with Moses and giving reason for the Gaels or the Gael people to have come from an ancestry linked to the Bible. So we're all very, very Catholic. But that, then peeling that back again, there's some archaeological evidence that has found stones in this Glen of Scotia and in Scotland, and the sapphire.
There's some evidence of trade
from
links with Northern Africa from Ireland, which is
I remember hearing another one that I heard. It was like the torques and the gold found very similar to the style of the torques that were worn by the pharaohs, and like some of the jewels and all the stuff in them. You're like, oh, so there's, and again,
there's a lot of like maybe.
There's a lot of maybes, and it's beautiful to kind of like even comprehend how old and how long ago this was for a moment.
You're talking 3,000 years.
4,000 years.
4,000 years.
Like, depending
where Scotia is.
Yeah. So, 2080? Yeah.
No, 80 is...
80 is now.
We are now 80.
BC.
BCE.
BCE. So, we have Nefertiti being the daughter of...
Nope.
Tutankhamun.
Nefertiti is the mother of Tutankhamun.
Of Tutankhamun.
I'm putting your notes over on the Nefertiti page.
Sorry. And the mother of Akhenaten, who then marries... Ankhesenamun. Who marries...
Tutankhamun first.
Also, Tutankhamun first. And then marries who could be known as Gael Hasser.
Gaelus is what I think it's pronounced, and the notion, the pseudo-historical notion, is that the word for the Scots comes from Scotia, and the word for the Gaels comes from Gaelus. That's so they're kind of mother and father of these related tribes of the Scots and the Gaels. And
they've found, so the story goes, it's Scotia or
Ankhesenamun.
Never going to remember. The story goes that she and her husband get exiled out of Egypt. They take enough to start a new civilization, and they head off. And they come to potentially the west coast of Portugal or thereabouts, and either their descendants or they keep on going. They land in Ireland, and then they keep on going up to Scotland. Potentially like 4 generations later that happens, or it's all the one. If it is all the one, Scotia, she left Egypt, she landed, they kept on coming to Ireland, they left burial boats behind them to bury their dead, and when they got to Ireland, it is then tied in with the Sons of Mill story, which we covered in the series.
Yes, because in our Book of Invasion series, because the other version of Scotia is that she's also the daughter of a pharaoh, but in that version she is one of the wives of Mill, and she's the mother of Amergin and Eberdon, who are 2 of the sons of Mill. Amergin is the druid who sings the
beautiful chant.
So making all of those scattered and disparate and pseudo-historical facts into a story.
Yeah.
Into a narrative with a character and an arc.
Mm-hmm.
My first question: what is the fundamental opposition at the centre of this story?
For me, I think it is. Now, we chatted a bit about this beforehand, and I think it links in even with Mish. It's survival. It's trying to survive past the point of being allowed to in your own society. Like they get expelled from Egypt, which is no mean feat at all.
So survival on one side of that fundamental opposition.
Mm-hmm.
What is sitting in opposition to the survival? Is it survival versus fuller living, the way it is in Mis and Dubh Ris? Or is it survive versus like annihilation? Or is it like what's the thing that it's in tension with?
Well, I think if they get expelled from, like, again, the Egyptians had pharaohs, they had amazing sun, they praised Ra, and all of their pharaohs were the gods. They were literally, incarnate physical representations of the gods. So if they pissed off the pharaoh, they got exiled from the pharaoh, they upset a god. And so you have the sun god bearing down on them, and they're exiled from their promised land to go find another one, in fear of, I can only imagine, she's either, and it's whether things happen to her in this story or how she decides to take control and find her own land that is prosperous.
Well, it's always more interesting if you've got an active protagonist.
Of course. I mean, like, I was kind of just stating that as a kind of...
Yeah. No, I mean, that's always a choice, but it's almost never more interesting to have a passive character.
And yet it's super, when you're getting factual about stuff, it's super easy to go into that. This happened, the person, then this happened, the person.
All this stuff happened to her. No, I mean, like, that's what's interesting is, like, what did she and her husband, the pharaoh, do to get... What did people do to get kicked out of Egypt? Like, how do you manage to do that?
The only thing, and
because he was the pharaoh.
This is treading, like, so this is kind of where we're like, okay, how many steps are, like, so we know that Nefertiti was potentially the mother, and we know that Scotia married her half brother Tutankhamun, and then she also married this guy.
Well, after Tutankhamun died.
Right.
So he's in his tomb.
He's in the tomb. She marries another guy, but their rule doesn't last. For various, and again, there's stuff.
So I think you have a choice here about whether or not to go on a little bit of an Egypt deep dive on, like, what happened to Tutankhamun, why his tomb was undiscovered for a really long time, which is interesting stuff. Like, it's a whole thing, and like, who were the pharaohs after Tutankhamun, and like what maybe happened to them, and maybe kind of get a little bit of, like, dig into that a little bit to try and find out what kicked them off.
Again,
or do you want to, like, elide the Egypt stuff and start out with Queen in Exile?
So I did again, like, it's so historic and precious in the Egyptian kind of lineage.
Well, this is the thing.
And
this is also
kind of
where I'm like, I always get a little uncomfortable when we start playing outside of our own little pond. Because I don't mind fucking around with Irish stories. Yeah. But I think it's very, very different. And I do think this is a thing in general. I think it's very, very different for us to retell the stories of a different culture.
And that's where I wouldn't, and even, like, throwing mud at the wall and see what sticks in terms of this, I've gone on the deep dive, but not enough of it has stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is,
facts,
dates, pseudo-history, theories, reading between the lines. And I love it, and it's fascinating, and it's great, but it doesn't help tell a narrative. It doesn't help this narrative, because you have to take a poetic kind of license with how you're going to recreate this story.
So what I'm getting for setup for this story is that you have a queen in exile who used to live in this incredible civilization that was way ahead of its time in terms of, like, other civilizations around it, in terms of the standard of living of the royals, also extremely kind of bound by ritual and, like, ritual practices and prayers and different things. You have a character who's grown up in all of that. And if you start it with her in exile, and the thing that she is running away from is the sun.
Yeah.
Then I think you've got you've got a goer, then you've got an ignition.
I also like the fact that she does die. She gets, so like, I love
Spoilers
the idea.
for a 3,000-year-old story.
Yeah. Obviously, she dies. It starts off at the grave of.
It starts out with the grave of Scotia, but yeah, she dies.
She dies pretty epically by jumping the horseback while pregnant over a ridge. Apparently, according to one source, in Ancient Origins. So that's kind of interesting in how she died
So she dies in battle.
In battle, yeah. According to, again, I think that's...
I don't think you need to get into the according to this person, according to that person.
Well, I am now, just because
I know
I'm
you are now, but like, I think
um,
that's an epic enough way for her to die that's all good. I guess my question is, like, what is the meaning of that death then?
Yeah. Well, I think
in
that's...
the context of this narrative.
I think she fulfills her own doom by running away from the sun. You can't run away from the sun, and she's cursed essentially in exile, and in running and continuously fleeing and trying to survive, she gets to finally land on an island that she thinks she'll be able to bring up peoples, but it's already claimed by land. There's hurt, there's grief between the sons of Mill and her. By running in and facing the sun and facing the battle on the last day and not turning away, she does fulfill her own prophecy of dying.
So she kind of fulfills her destiny. But are you? And this is also a choice. Are you going to conflate the two Scotias and have her as the wife of Mill and the mother of Amergin?
To be honest, I am leaning that way, because again,
I like it. I think it's good.
It's with this prelude, I think we can go, look, lads, it's 4,000 years ago, we're not really sure, so
we are not interested in telling a historically accurate story on this podcast.
No,
and I think that's always kind of been.
And what's the meaning of myth and story? It's only to evoke and excite imaginative play, and also link it to something that evokes something. Evocates. Oh, it is.
Yeah. But we're like, that's, I think that's
while being rooted in something that
feels true. Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between feeling true and having kind of a truth, a narrative truth and an emotional truth, and having a factual historical truth. Mm-hmm. And this is not a history podcast.
Because again, if Scotia runs away with this prophecy looming over her head that or curse, it's a self-fulfilling, a self-believing curse.
Yes, but I also think if you think of her as the mother of Amergin, mm-hmm. and what Amergin learned from her, mm-hmm. and how that ties into the song of Amergin.
Absolutely.
I think that also gives it a different meaning.
So I think that would be really nice to play in there as well. I think I was wondering about doing that, because that's a whole Amergin thing, and I love Amergin's song, and it's so beautiful, and it's such a prayer, it's such an incantation, it's such a gorgeous sentiment. Mm-hmm.
But if you think of him as being the the son of an Egyptian princess,
yeah,
it kind of fits.
Yeah.
Because here's somebody being like, who's descended of a line of people who are like, hello, I am literally the son and a god.
I am literally.
And he's standing there proclaiming and like announcing his divinity in connection to nature.
Oh, so that I actually, if I use the I am thing.
See, best mantra.
I am, I am the sun.
Like when we did that kid story and all of the birds sing I am.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I am. So I think
you can tell it's good when you get a little misty in the eye.
That's nice. No,
that's how you know that you found the story, though.
But I think I that for me gives me something to latch on for her to do, to be doing, and to be active in it.
Yes.
Because if she's always figuring out, if this becomes about her identity and how she finds herself from being exiled from her, again, it's the exact opposite of well, it's similar. She's exiled Mish's you know, her whole...
Yeah, Mish is in a kind of a self-imposed exile.
Exactly. And by doing that, you lose your identity to where you come from. You lose your sense of meaning because you've lost your tribe. She'd bring her family with her now, and that's her tribe. But she herself is now trying to find out who she is, what ground she can call her own. And yeah, if that's the lesson that Amergin learns from her, and she gives herself to the soil, the land itself, in driving over the ridge, and you know.
Yeah, if there's something kind of like, because if you think about that battle, it's the same conflict as is happening with the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Sons of Mill, where the Tuatha Dé Danann go underground, and it's the same conflict where Ban Bafola and Eiriú kind of agree to give their names to the land in exchange for truce. And I think it's interesting because she also gives her name to a land, just not this one.
Yeah.
So there's something interesting about like the fact that enough of her has been passed on to be carried on.
Yes.
By her sons and daughters, and by her children, and by the tribe that she's taught. So that, like, you know, it's probably not the moment that she would choose to die, but there's something about, you know, riding a horse and falling and breaking your neck that's like, all right, this was not the moment that I would have picked, but enough momentum has been built that it will go on without her. Like she has forged enough of a legacy,
and she's become such a legend within her own clan that either for one generation or four more, they still hold on to her name. And even if they travel from away from Ireland and they go to Scotland, they hold on to her name,
which is the whole idea. And that ties in then to like the naming of the land of Eiriú as well. Is there is also the naming of the land of Scotia.
I'll have to be careful once I get into that bit, because we must link in the show notes the story from the last season, or the season of the Book of Invasions, the Eiriú story that you told, because that'll be a nice one for people to listen to.
If you want to listen to the Amergin Eiriú story,
because that's kind of another way of looking at this story from without the Scotia thing.
She's not in that one because we didn't know better then.
So yeah, look, this is going to be an interesting one to try and put together. Hopefully you enjoy it. Let us know what you think about the post show of Mis and Dubh Ris, and if you have any questions about that mad one, and what you think about this whole pre-show chat.
Pre-show chat.
Pre-show,
post-show. We're still putting Scotia out before this.
Show,
right?
Pre-show. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure.
I mean, time you might mean. We're recording this before we record Scotia.
Yeah.
Is the main thing. Okay, well, that's
us. Thanks a million.
We'll be showing September.
In MVP.
We show an MVP.
Yeah, we have
check it out. I'm also developing a show. It's going to be an Underworld Games with Roll for Legends and Charisma Check, so check that out.
Savage.
And are you up to anything else?
Well, we're doing a few things for the Poker Festival.
We are.
So that's coming up soon.
That'll be coming up soon enough. So keep an eye out for us. You can find us on websites and things. And if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Candlelit Tales.
And if you want to subscribe, like the video, make a comment below, do please. Or wherever you
feed the algorithm.
Subscribe to your podcast, give us a rating. We love that too.
And if you don't know what we look like, you can look on YouTube.
Is that?
If you're listening to this and you're not looking on YouTube, if you are looking on YouTube, that was a weird thing to say, sorry.
And we say weird things. Alright, look guys, we'll have more myths and stories and chats for you very soon. Keep safe and sound and happy out. We chat to you. Good luck.
Bye.